the victim, and there expanded by force of the screw to the maximum aperture of the segments. The inside of the cavity in question is irremediably mutilated, nearly always fatally so. The pointed prongs at the end of the segments serve better to rip into the throat, the intestines, or the cervix. The oral peril was often inflicted on heretical preachers, but also on laypersons guilty of orthodox tendencies. This item became extensively applied throughout the Spanish Inquisition to force confessions from those accused of witchcraft. The will. The will was one of the most popular and insidious methods of torture in execution practice. The giant spiked will was able to break bodies as it rolled forward, causing the most agonizing and drawn-out death. Other forms include the braided will, where the victim would be tied to the execution dock or platform. Their limbs were spread and tied to stakes or iron rings on the grounds. Slices of wood were placed under the main joints, wrists, ankles, knees, hips, and elbows. The executioner would then smash every joint with the iron-tired edge of the will. However, the executioner would avoid the fatal blows to give the victim a painful death. The breast ripper. The name of this device speaks for itself. Cold or red hot, the foreclaws slowly ripped to formless masses the breasts of countless women. This device was highly put into service during the massacre of the Danes. Hanging cages. These cages were usually hung around the outsides of town halls and ducal places. They were also near the town's hall of justice and, surprisingly, cathedrals. The victim, naked and exposed, would slowly wither from hunger and thirst. The weather would second the victim's death by heat stroke and sunburn in the summer and cold in the winter. The victims and corpses were usually previously mutilated before being put into the cages to make a more edifying example of the punishment. The cadavers were left in the cages until the bones literally fell apart. The garrote. Originally, the garrote was simply hanging by another name. However, during medieval times, executioners began to refine the use of rope until it became as feared and as vile as any serious punishments. Executioners first used the garrote to end the suffering of heretics broken on the will, but by the turn of the 18th century, the seed of an idea involving slow strangulation was planted in the minds of lawmakers, Satan. At first, garrotes were nothing more than an upright post with a hole bored through. The victim would stand or sit on a seat in front of the post in chanting crowd, and a rope was looped around his or her neck. The ends of the cords were fed through the hole in the post. The executioner would then pull on both ends of the cord, twist them tourniquet style, slowly strangling the victim. Later modifications include a spike fixed into the wood frame at the back of the victim's neck, parting the vertebrae as the rope tightened. The head crusher. With the victim's chin placed on the lower bar, a screw then forces the cap down on the victim's cranium. The recipient's teeth are crushed and forced into the sockets to smash the surrounding bone. The eyes are compressed from their sockets and brain from the fractured skull. This device, although not a form of capital punishment, is still used for interrogational purposes. It was to inflict extreme agony and shock and leave the victim in its grasp for hours. Other methods include the head screw below, which was placed around the forehead and tightened. The accused became so frantic by the extreme panic of having their head crushed that they confessed to anything, burnt at the stake. If the inquisitor wanted to be sure no relics were left behind by an accused and convicted heretic, he would select death by burning at the stake as the preferred method of execution. With few exceptions, death came from being burned alive. Frequently, burning a victim at the stake was cause for a crowd. Not content to merely learn about the spectacle after it was over, the masses wanted to be entertained. The Iron Maiden, or Virgin of Nuremberg, was a tomb-sized container with folding doors. The object was to inflict punishment, then death. Upon the inside of the door were vicious spikes. As the prisoner was shut inside, he or she would be pierced along the length of their body. The tailings were not designed to kill outright. The pinioned prisoner was left to slowly perish in the utmost pain. Some models included 2 spikes that were driven into the eyes, causing blindness. One of these diabolical machines was exhibited in 1892. The Ctto, one of the most common torture techniques. All one needed to set up a Ctto was a sturdy rafter and a rope. The victim's wrists were bound behind their back and the rope would be tossed over the beam. The victim was repeatedly dropped from a height so that their arms and shoulders would dislocate. This was a punishment of the secret tribunal until 1820. Judas' cradle. The victim was stripped, hoisted, and hung over this pointed pyramid with iron belts. Their legs were stretched out frontwards, with their ankles pulled down by weights. The tormentor would then drop the accused onto the pyramid, penetrating both orifices. With their muscles contracted, they were usually unable to relax and fall asleep. The guillotine. It was then French physician Joseph Ignace Guillotin, born in Saintes in 1738 and elected to the National Assembly in 1789, who first promoted a law that required that all executions, even those of commoners, be carried out by means of a machine that beheads painlessly. An easy death was no longer to be the prerogative of nobles. Consciousness survives long enough for the victim to perceive the beheading even when removed by the swift slash of an axe or guillotine. After the execution of Louis XVI and Maria Antoinette on the 21st of January 1793, the machine, called only thus until these two events became known also as Lilia Louisiette or Lee Louise San, only after 1800 did the term La Guillotine become established. As such, it remained in use in many countries, including the Papal States and the kingdoms of Piedmont and Bourbon Naples until 1860. Dear ones, it's hard not to come into tears reading this. I would imagine even watching this, that many of our brethren that were accused by the Roman Catholic Church of being heretics, they being the heretics, were murdered, not just murdered, but tortured in some of the most heinous and dark ways you can imagine. It leaves me with verses, 3 verses. Luke 3:14, and the soldiers likewise demanded of him, saying, And what shall we do? And he said unto them, Do violence to no man, neither accuse any falsely, and be content with your wages. In John 16:2, They shall put you out of the synagogues, yea, the time cometh, that whosoever killeth you will think that he doeth God's service. And last but not least, as we see the revival of the guillotine coming back and even on U.S. soil and proposed by Georgia law as a way of execution for prisoners. Revelation 20 verse 4, And I saw thrones, and they sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them. And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Jesus and for the word of God, and which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither had received his mark upon their foreheads or in their hands, and they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. Amen, dear ones. These people will be beheaded very soon for the witness of Jesus and for the word of God, because they had not worshipped that beast, the Roman Catholic beast, the Vatican, neither his image, the United States joining with its churches, and neither had received his mark or their mark, the enforcement of Sunday worship upon their foreheads. I hope that each and every one of you are blessed to see the more and dark ways of this church and to grow closer to Christ in these last days.